Good afternoon, class. Today we're going to talk about probability. But before we get to the computations or any other deeper concepts of probability, we are going to familiarize ourselves to necessary terms that we should understand before we get to those parts, namely experiment, outcome, sample space, and event. We're going to talk about what they are and how they are different from one another. But before we get there, let us have a review on what is being described or defined. A collection of distinct, well-defined objects forming a group. Okay, this is a topic that you discussed back on grade 7 and it's called a set. Next, if all elements of set A are elements of set B, then set A is a blank of set B. If your answer is subset, then you still remember your grade 7 topics. Here are some examples of how we can use these concepts. Set of all numbers in a die include 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and 6. A subset of all numbers in a die are even numbers in a die. They include the elements 2, 4, and 6. So basically, when we include all the possible outcomes, we call that a set. And when we only choose few of the outcomes out of all outcomes that are possible, we call that a subset. And that's way back when we are talking about set. Now we are just going to have other terminologies related to probability used, but the concept is the same. For this activity, I want you to name the activity you see on the screen. Okay, so if you said something like tossing a coin or a hand tossing a coin, then you got good observation. How about this one? Yes, the guy there is drawing lottery. And how about this one? That is rolling dice. So what are the similarities to these activities? Okay, if you said something like you are not sure what the outcome will be, then you got the idea correctly. There are many other things that they are alike in, but that's the similarity that we are going to focus on today. So just like these activities, when we talk about probability, we are talking about the chance of something or an outcome happening. Okay, and some of the terms related to that are these. Number one, experiment. Experiment is a situation or activity involving chance or probability that leads to results or outcomes. Just like in the previous slide, that includes tossing a coin, drawing lottery, and rolling dice. We call these experiments because when we do this, we are not really sure. Is it going to give us heads or tails? Is it going to give us one, two, three on the lottery? Is it going to give us two and one, three and five on rolling two dice together? So we are really not sure what the outcome will be. So we call these experiments. Okay. Next, outcome. Outcome is a possible result of a random experiment. So if we are going to use the same activities as we showed earlier, tossing a coin can come up with heads. Drawing a lottery can give us an 8. And rolling two dice together can give us 5 and 5. That's what we call outcomes. They are single result that can come out of the experiment. How about when we include everything, just like in a set? So when we talk about all the possible outcomes, then we call that a sample space. Now, in tossing a coin, the sample space includes head and tail. When we draw lottery, the possible outcomes include all the numbers that are in the lottery box. And Lastly, when we throw two dice together, there are numbers of outcomes that we can come up with. So sample space is including all the possible outcomes. So in most experiments, they include a big number of possible outcomes in the set. Now, what if we only choose few out of the possible outcomes or out of the sample space? Then we call that an event. An event is a subset of a sample space. For example, if we toss a coin and we get a tail, then that is a subset of all the possible outcomes. So that is an event. In drawing a lottery, if we only choose 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9 balls out of all the balls in the lottery box, then that is just an event. We don't include everything. And in rolling a die, getting 1 and 2, or rolling two dice together rather, getting 1 and 2, or 5 and 6 are just events because they are not really including all the possible outcomes. Okay, so those are the differences between those four terminologies. Now, let's try to check using some of the subjects in school whether you can identify a given set or single item as either experiment, outcome, event, or sample space. So let's try to roll this wheel. Okay, for AP, if we are going to pick countries involved in the World War One and got Germany, what do you think Germany is among those four concepts that we have just discussed? The answer is outcome because it only includes one out of the many possible outcomes that we can pick out of the countries involved in the World War One. Let's try other subjects. For Filipino, if we list all the characters of Florante at Laura and pick one and got Florante, we call Florante as what? It is also an outcome because it is only one out of the many possible outcomes in choosing characters of Florante at Laura. How about in science? In relation to testing a prediction, plugging a wire to an outlet to check if the machine will work is what concept when it comes to probability? It is the experiment because it is the thing that we do to check what the outcome will be. How about in MAPE? If we talk about components of MAPE and we listed music, arts, PE, and health, then what did we list? We list the sample space because we included all the possible outcomes of the components of MAPE. Filipino is done, MAPE is done. Okay, so we only are not yet through with math or English, so let's keep spinning. Okay, for English, parts of a sentence. So if we see in a list subject, predicate, direct object, indirect object, subject complement, what is that in relation to parts of a sentence? It is technically a sample space because it includes all the possible parts of a sentence. Okay, next. Of course, since you only have math as the only left subject, let's just click that. If we see quadrant 1 and quadrant 2, in relation to quadrants of the Cartesian plane, what concept is that? It is an event because we chose two out of the four possible outcomes, which include quadrant 1, quadrant 2, quadrant 3, and quadrant 4. So again, just to summarize everything, since we're done with all the subjects, experiment is what we do in which we are not sure what the outcome will be. Outcome is just one out of the many possible results. Event is a number of possible outcomes out of the complete sample space. And sample space is the complete set of all possible results. Now let's have these following questions as our assignment. For numbers 1, 3, and 4, there's only one correct answer each. But for numbers 2 and 5, there are plenty of correct answers. So I'm not expecting you to have the same answers for those two numbers. Because as we are talking about probability, the probability of you getting the same answers for numbers 2 and 5 when it's your choice to pick what you will give as outcomes for rolling a die, and the outcomes or giving an event of three outcomes out of picking a card from a deck, the probability of you having the same answers to those is very low. So I'm not expecting you to have the same answers for those numbers, or else it will be suspicious. Okay, so that will be your assignment, and I'm expecting to see you submitting them or checking them on our next face to face meeting. Goodbye, class.